Okay, great. So good morning, folks. My name is Sanjay, and I'm going to walk you through this webinar where we are going to talk about enhancing your agility with the help of DevOps. So I hope all of you can see my screen and can hear me okay. Okay, and in case you have any questions, you can type in your questions. You have a question section where you can, post your questions, and I'll try to help, answer those. Great. Okay, so welcome once again, and we are going to spend about 60 to 70 minutes to talk about how DevOps can help achieve or enhance your agility. Here is the agenda or the objective that we have. So at the end of the session, you will be able to understand, DevOps and why DevOps is so important in today's world. The DevOps lifecycle, what are the different life cycles that we have, or the overall life cycle that we have when we talk about DevOps. We will talk about Puppet and how Puppet can help, manage your config management function. And I'll show you the demo as well using Puppet. And I will also try to install Apache Web Server using Puppet. We will talk about CI or continuous integration using Jenkins tool, and how again Jenkins is helpful or useful when we talk about the frequent deployment, frequent releases, frequent changes. Sounds good? Okay, let's get started. So what is DevOps? So DevOps is a mindset that enables communication, collaboration, and integration between software developers, quality engineers, IT operations, basically to enable the rapid evolution of product or services. That means rapid changes that you want to make, or rapid deployments, rapid releases that you want to make. And in today's world, it's kind of has become mandatory that you need to have the rapid changes or deployment or changes going into production. Now, how the current setup that we have, being like typical IT company where you have dev, QA, and operations, like 3 siloed teams, and that in today's world is becoming a problem because, as I said, in today's world, the demand is like how can we rapidly make changes, rapidly test it with or verify it with customers before we make any maybe even bigger changes. So the need of the hour is to have a better collaboration between these 3 teams. So like any product development companies, typically you have these 3 core functions. You have set of developers working on a product or developing a product. You have set of again engineers working on ensuring that the quality of the code or the quality of the application is really good, and when it goes to production, we don't have any surprises from our customers. And then we have operations or IT operations taking care of ensuring that we have right infrastructure in place, we have application availability in place, and all that. Now, as I said, since in today's world, typically, all these 3 work in siloed environment, that has become kind of a problem, because then what happens if you have a siloed environment, it becomes more of a transactional that as a developer, I just work on the application or the code, and I do not worry about or care about how application can be, is being QA'd, or how application is running in production, and how our customers are experiencing or using it. So to achieve that, we need to have, as I said, DevOps mindset, and that means the greater collaboration, greater communication, and greater integration between these 2 teams, Dev and Ops. When I said Dev, it is not just the set of developers, but Dev and QA combined becomes Dev function. And then operations, has multiple roles to play. I have, listed some of the roles that we have under Ops, like system engineers, system administrators, release engineers, DBAs, network engineers, security professionals, and other subtitles or subdisciplines that we have within operations. So I think the core work is anyway not going to go away. There are some changes, of course, where being a system admin or system engineers, you no longer need to manage the infrastructure so closely because you have now service providers like cloud, for example, AWS, Rackspace, and all. So you do not, going forward, you may not have to worry too much about thinking about the infrastructure as a primarily, but then other roles, for example, release engineers, database engineers, or database admins. These are again they are going to continue, but it is just that what we are talking about is that we have to kind of change the mindset. The way we are organized is not enough, for the future needs or even the current needs. So that's when we say that we need to have greater collaboration, greater communication, and greater integration between these two functions. Moving on to the next one. So DevOps, as I mentioned, these three typical functions within the product development organization which we have is one is the development, set of development or the development team. The second one is quality assurance, set of quality engineers. And the third one is technical operations or IT operations. All these three work together, and then it forms a DevOps team or DevOps organization or kind of DevOps mindset. So DevOps is not a tool, or DevOps is not, I would say, a function or a process, but DevOps is more of a mindset that we work on a organizational goal to and to basically achieve the organizational goal. So if organization has a goal that I want to have a capability where I can make frequent releases, frequent changes, unless you have a DevOps mindset, you cannot achieve that. Because as I said, if you have a siloed environment, it becomes more of a transactional way of handling things. And then as a dev, I do not have visibility into QA. As a QA, I do not have visibility into dev or operations, right? So that's when what we are talking about is that all these three critical functions as part of the development organization need to work really closer, closer and need to work together. That I have a organizational goal to achieve, and what kind of role I have to play, right? Okay. Is it better now? Okay, thank you. Moving on to the next one, which talks about the development and operations. Again, as a role, and then different roles within the dev and operations. So as a developer, what you do, you basically develop or modify applications. So you develop a new application or modify an existing application. Or there could be also a situation where you maybe change the application entirely. That can again come under modify, but that's another thing, that you may have a lot of legacy applications which you want to radically change that and make it like more of a future-ready application. While doing that, you may try new techniques, new technologies, while working on some of these things. That is at very high level the role of a developer. Now, role of an operations is to build, deploy, and release the code to all the way to production for the consumption of our end users. As a operations, we also have a responsibility to have better performance and availability all the time for our applications. Now, availability, we cannot say that as a feature. Availability has become more of a hygiene factor that we need to have our applications available close to 100% all the time. So that means for operations, the availability becomes the #1 priority. Of course, performance is also an important aspect, but availability is the #1 priority for ops. And availability, although we say this, 100% or close to 100%, but there's a lot of work, for operations that we need to ensure. Ensuring that, infrastructure is available, ensuring that we have enough capacity in place to serve, all the requests that we, get in. At the same time, understanding the applications, like, how our application, is designed or even deployed to production. And that basically translates to how, your application can perform in production environment. Another role for operations, and as I said, this is kind of high level, but creating or enhancing services. So that means, and services could be like, maybe internal services for operations, like maybe some automation, or maybe something new that we want to develop for the service, or basically to improve the application availability and the performance, right? So these are again the roles for developers as well as for operations at kind of very high level. Now we talk about why DevOps is needed, why it has become such an important, and where do we think that we have the gap today. So typically, as a dev team or dev or QA team, you gather the customer's requirement, you understand that part, and you start working on that. And then finally, you push the change to operations or to production. Now, if operations team is not fully aligned or fully aware, like what kind of changes that we are making, that becomes a big hole, big gap between the process that between the dev team and operations team, or the process that we have defined. So unless we bridge the gap, it becomes really a big problem. Because think about a situation where I'm an operations guy, and I've been given a piece of code, and then I deploy that code to production, and I have absolutely no visibility what kind of changes that we are pushing into the production. Now, if something happens to production, again, I really struggle to find out what went wrong, right, and how I can quickly maybe restore the service. So as I mentioned, we need to have we need to bridge the gap between the dev, QA, and operations team. So basically, dev organization and operations organization, to have really good visibility into how the application is designed. For operations, maybe need to understand how the application is designed, how it is developed, when we make the changes, what kind of changes that we are pushing into production, and those kind of things. At the same time, as a dev and QA, we need to understand that the piece of code that I'm writing, or the piece of code that I'm making the change into the existing code, whether it is going to successfully work in production or not, or what kind of challenges that I may face, those kind of stuff. Or at the same time, maybe the visibility into how my production environment is designed, because unless I understand that part, I may not be able to understand the piece of code that I have developed, how it is going to work or behave in production. Okay. Again, continuing on DevOps. So as a developer, you introduce changes. We talked about earlier. Introduce changes means you make some maybe new changes, you maybe develop new application, and then you also try to implement every new techniques as well, every new technologies that you try to implement, to achieve your goals basically. And then for operations, change, we call it as is the big enemy for operations, because typically, I would say 70 to 80% of the cases, the problem that we happen, or the incidents or the outages that happen, is because of some change or the other. So as an operations, the moment I know that there is some change coming in, I know that my life is going to be busy maybe for next few hours, few days, few weeks. So change overall is the enemy for operations. Although can we stop the change? We cannot, right? That's what we have been talking about, that today's world demands rapid changes, rapid deployment, rapid releases. So change is going to happen for sure, and that means that is what we are talking about, that we need to have maybe the process change on how we are organized today. Change can lead to instability. That's what we talked about, that most of the outages that happen is because of some change or the other. Now let's understand it further. So again, Dev and Ops team primarily, if you do not have visibility into each other's role, what can happen is, as a dev, you push some tool or changes. As an ops, I do not have visibility into that, and maybe both the teams are trying to maybe solve some common problem, but since we do not have alignment, we do not have visibility into each other's role, we may try probably the same tools, same techniques in different ways, and that could create some confusion. This is about, again, how it works if you, again, do not have DevOps mindset, is that as a developer, you send out artifacts based on the requirements that you have from your client. You basically push the change or push the artifact after you have made all the changes. As an operations, you manually actually hack the script received from a development team and make the changes to the config file to reflect the final change in production, which could potentially lead to an issue. This is what we talked about, that in this case, if you see, Ops guy has no visibility into what kind of changes that has been made by dev team. And now, when it comes to the deployment to production, since Ops, again, do not have good visibility into what kind of changes that we are making, Ops team may have to make some changes to make something work in production. And that is, again, not a good idea because you do not know what kind of problem it can create in production and things like that. Moving on to the next one. This is about another use case where something is deployed to production and you see the 404, right? 404, I think most of you are aware that 404 is nothing but page not found or file not found. Now, what happened in this case is that the dev team, they said that all the artifacts are fine. The error is because of some other issue. QA was given wrong setup, right? If you again see here, it's more of a transactional setup that we have within the organization. That Ops says that I have no idea why customers are getting 404. Dev team says that, well, all my changes are fine. The changes, the error is not because of my code, but maybe the QA was given the wrong setup. But again, if you see the overall conversation, it's more of a finger pointing that it's not my problem, your problem. If you think about from customer's point of view, they do not care whether it is because of dev team, QA team, or ops team, right? The only thing that they care is as long as my application works, I don't care whether it is because of dev or because of QA or because of ops. So as I said, we may have different responsibilities, we may have different roles to play, but we have to think from customer's point of view that all the changes, all the deployments that we are doing, how it is going to work in production. Moving on to the next one. Again, if you see the developer is like finger pointing, maybe in very bad mode. In this case, developers realized that the correct DB was not deployed. Maybe very angry person because maybe he did everything from his side, but even then it is not working. Now Ops, after the deployment, QA sees some anomalies and raises defects. That is after deployment. Now that is not a good scenario because after you deploy the change to production and then if you discover issues, that is a big problem. Worst case, I've also seen situations where you make the changes, you do the deployment, and then, you could not even figure out if everything is fine or not. Maybe your QA team said everything is fine. And then your end users, they experience problem and they raise problems that, after, I'm not able to access this particular service or I'm getting errors and all that. So, which is again, not a good impression on you, right? And in the competitive world, if you have this kind of setup, you cannot survive. Your customers will run away to your competitor, and that's not a good situation, right, for the organization. So now for all of this, the solution that we have is the DevOps is a solution. Okay, I'm hearing some feedback that my voice is not audible properly. Can all of you hear me okay? Can all of you hear me okay? Can you confirm? Okay. Yeah, so Punita, I have a confirmation from many participants that they can hear me okay. Do you want to check your maybe the sound settings on your laptop or computer? Okay, there is a lag in slide loading sometimes, it seems. Okay. Okay. Okay, hopefully it becomes better. I'll go a little slow so that, especially when I change the slide. Okay. Good. Let's talk about this one. So DevOps as a solution. We talked about all the problems so far that, we have, if we do not have, DevOps mindset, you may have a lot of these issues, what we have been talking about. So what is the solution? The solution that we have is we need to have all these three teams or these three critical teams work together to work on a business goal, right? As I said, as an organization, you have some business goals to achieve. And now within the teams, or within the organization, you may have different responsibilities. You may be a developer, you may be a QA person, you may be an ops person. As I said, for end users or our customers, our end result or the goal is, whatever product that we develop should be available to our customers. Now, as I mentioned earlier, customers do not care whether, who developed it, what kind of testing that you guys did, what kind of deployment methods that you follow. The only thing that they care about is, I pay for the service and I should get the service that I get, that I, consume. So that means, we need to have the DevOps mindset. The reason, as I mentioned earlier, is that in today's world, there is a demand or there is a need to have frequent changes, frequent deployment. We talk a lot about the agile mindset, agile methods. So DevOps basically bridges the gap between the silos of software developers and operations to enable agile methods. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. And I'll pause for a minute just in case the slide takes some time to refresh. But these are the DevOps skills. So DevOps, we need to have, of course, a lot of tools so that we can administer and customize, our services or, monitor our services. As a DevOps, we need to have scripting and automation skills. Automation, because, again, if you have a lot of dependency of or process of doing manual things, you cannot go very far. So we need to have scripting or automation skills. Coding skills. Again, you need not be a great developer. You don't need to know, maybe the Java development or any other way of developing application, but you need to have enough understanding about what has been developed. How, if you have maybe a critical problem, you should be able to find out why we have these kind of issues. Again, you may not be able to fix it, but detection of the problem becomes easy if you know, if you have some kind of coding skills, or at least if you understand what is the flow. So in case of, say, outage, you are the one who face or who actually try to resolve the issue. So if you have some kind of coding skills, it helps you to basically detect the problem faster. Okay, next, it talks about the process reengineering. So it basically reflects the holistic view of IT and development as a single system. What we have been talking about, that you may have different role to play, but basically everyone is important and critical. So that in this case, we need to have visibility into each other's responsibility. So what we have been talking about, that typical IT organization, you have a siloed environment where you work in kind of more of in siloed fashion, and you do not have visibility into each other. Now, these are some of the DevOps skills and tools that we use. So Linux and Unix for the operating system, where in today's world, again, I would not say every application runs on Unix or Linux, but most of the applications are moving on Unix tech stack. You need to have some kind of shell scripting knowledge, either Bash said AWK, PHP, Python, and all that. And at the same time, you need to have some coding experience like Perl, Python, Ruby, even maybe Java. The other one, which is again very popular, very important, is the config management tool. Again, why? Because our infrastructure is growing and we need to have some kind of automated way of managing our configuration. If we do not do it, again, it becomes really challenging for operations to manage the configuration. Either you need maybe a lot of people to manage all these boxes. I've seen conversations like, we have, okay, these many machines, so we need these many people. Now, again, if you adopt to config management, where you can actually automate a lot of these stuff, you do not need those many people to manage these many hosts, because one is it's automated, and automated means it's less prone to any human errors, and at the same time you can really achieve something really faster. Bare metal configuration. I mean, again, we have a lot of tools available, like Cobbler, Foreman, and DHCP, DNS, PXE for your OS installation. Going to the next one. So this slide talks about the DevOps cycle. How it starts, from product development to all the way to moving the code to production. So the first one on the top, on the left-hand side, you see version control system. And again, we will talk about it, that what kind of version control system that we have and how it is useful. But typically, you have a version control system where you keep the revisions in the system. And then you have the continuous integration or the CI tools, which helps you actually release the code to production or to maybe all the environments all the way to production. Now, CI tools, we have something like Jenkins, which again helps you achieve that. So one is you integrate all the tools or the the different applications into one, and then you finally release it to production. Now let me give you one example. Say think about say Facebook as a company. Suppose you are part of Facebook, and you have maybe say 3 different teams. The first team is say taking care of all the login related activities for the user. So first team is say login team. The second team is for say maybe photo uploads, and the third team is for say the like button that you see in Facebook. Now, when you say want to release an application say for Facebook, what you do, you have the version control system where you have all the codes for say these 3 applications into a central place. Then you have continuous integration tools, which basically integrates everything together, right? So typically what you want is you definitely want to integrate all these 3 pieces together so that it becomes a Facebook application. So you integrate that into one, then you go into multiple iterations. I mean, you do all the automated tests and everything, and then finally you achieve release automation. So, and then finally it goes to production. Now when you come down to this slide, it talks about infrastructure automation. That means you need to have some kind of automation in place. If you know about AWS, which is the cloud service provider, cloud infrastructure service provider, they provide elasticity to the infrastructure. There are some comments or maybe questions. Let me read that out. So these DevOps skills are required by infra team who manages the apps, servers, and Unix boxes. Do you think this DevOps skills can be used by application development team? So question from Suresh. So Suresh, I think you talked about the previous slide. Oops, this one. So these skills are the skills for the DevOps, I would say. And again, DevOps covers the infrastructure team and the application operations team as well. So the team who manages the availability and performance of the application and ensures that application is available all the time to our end users, that particular team is called DevOps. Now to do that, of course you need to have a lot of skills within the team, and which is what we call as DevOps skills. Now the question that you have is, do you think this DevOps skills can be used by application development team? I would say yes. You may not need to have all the skills, but if you have, that is what we have been talking about, is that if you know how DevOps functions, and I think you need to know, then only it is called DevOps. So that means Dev knows maybe enough about Ops, may not be everything that Ops does, and at the same time, Ops knows everything about Dev, or maybe how the application is developed. So that is what we are talking about DevOps. So at high level, I think you need to know the different responsibilities within the product development organization. And that means, if you're a dev, you of course need to know how your infrastructure is laid out for your applications. Hope I answered your question, Suresh. Okay, continue on this one. So the bottom part here, it talks about that you need to have some infrastructure automation in place. Now, if you remember, last October, right? Flipkart had, some great deal in the newspaper. Probably that was the first time. And then within few hours, the Flipkart servers crashed. Why? Because maybe they did not have infrastructure automation in place. Means they did not have probably elasticity in place so that they can, expand or contract their, infrastructure. So the moment you have a surge in demand, you need to have that kind of flexibility or the setup in your infrastructure that you can expand your infrastructure. You need to have, that kind of elasticity. Now, as I said, there are service providers like AWS, which gives you this kind of flexibility. At the same time, if you have, say, your own data center, you can also have this kind of setup where, based on the surge in demand or reduction in demand, you can adjust your infrastructure accordingly. So that is what it talks about, that we need to have some kind of flexibility or elasticity within your infrastructure. At the same time, even if you are, say, adding it manually, you don't have to, you should not be actually doing all the config management manually. You need to have enough tooling techniques in place so that you make the changes automated. You should not do any manual changes ideally, because that can again lead to some potential problems. On your left, on the bottom of this page, it talks about the application management, which is about ensuring that your application is up and running all the time to production. Now, if you see this guy, he's looking at the monitors to ensure that our application is stable and working fine for our end users or customers. So that means, what I talked about is that you need to have monitoring and alerting. And again, monitoring, I would say the demand is that you need to have proactive monitoring. You need to probably understand the trend as well. So, and that's why you see a lot of graphs here, this guy is looking at. So that means you need to have visibility, like, how my application usage is trending, how the availability is trending, how the, say, the utilization of my infrastructure is trending. And based on that, you need to be able to take calls and take some preventive steps instead of waiting for a problem to happen and then you work in more of a reactive way, right? Okay, any questions so far? I'll pause for a minute maybe to take any questions that you have. So question from Kamlesh, when we are considering infrastructure automation, is cloud skills play major role, or it would be major option? So as I mentioned, cloud gives you a lot of flexibility, by the way. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with AWS. When you log into AWS, it gives you the elasticity option. And of course, you have to do the setup, but actually it gives you that kind of capability that you can have your infrastructure really elastic based on the surge in demand, or if you, if the number of heads has come down, you can even reduce the infrastructure that you have. But it need not necessarily be someone like, cloud service provider. You can achieve the same, capability in your own data center that you have. There could be some compliance requirement that you cannot move your application to the public cloud. And I've worked with some of the companies where they say that, I know that AWS provides a lot of flexibility, but I cannot move my application there because, we have a compliance issue. Maybe they are storing credit card information and all that. Now, if you're doing that, you cannot again go to AWS cloud, which is a public cloud, because again, of compliance issue. So that means you need to have a similar capability in your own setup, in your own data center. But as I said, there are a lot of tools available now which provides you or which gives you the capability to have that kind of elasticity or infrastructure automation in your own data center. Kamlesh, I hope I answered your question. Okay, taking some more questions. So is it applicable to, is it only applicable to agile methodologies? Question from Soma. So agile is, if you're just referring to infrastructure automation, it's not for agile, I would say. So agile, what we talked about is that if you have agile methods, if your organization is following agile method very strictly, you need to have the DevOps mindset there as well. You cannot just being saying agile, you cannot just say that we develop the code by following some agile methods. It's not complete then. When we talk about Scrum teams, when we talk about agile methods, you need to have all the stakeholders as part of that. So that means you need to have dev teams representation, you need to have QA and ops representation as well. And that's what is called agile method or the Scrum way of handling things, or Scrum teams. Hope that answered your question, Soma. The next one is from Manish. So as per DevOps, do we need all these skills as part of team from day one? Okay, so Manish, by the way, you do not need to have everything on day one, especially when you're new to the role. You develop some of the skills, while on the job. You may not necessarily need to have every skills, but to become a successful DevOps, engineer, I think it is kind of essential that you need to have some of these skills and very strongly, because without that, again, you may not be successful. Okay. Any other questions? So, Aniket, your question, DevOps, when does it come in pictures? I'm not sure what your question is. Can you rephrase your question, please? So for QA, when does DevOps come in picture? So what I talked about is that when we say dev, it is not just a set of developers. It's a combination of developers as well as QA team. So, when we say dev as part of DevOps, it's dev means dev plus QA. Okay. Okay, so I think your question is about the skill set. When does DevOps skills come into picture for QA? Okay, so again, when you think about the automation, and when we talk about, say, release automation, QA has a lot of role to play there, right? Because as a developer, you develop the code and then you deploy the code to production, right? And of course, you submit your changes or you commit your changes to this repository system. Now, as a QA, your role is to ensure that you QA the application, what has been developed, and once QA certifies that yes, now it can go to production, then it goes to production. As a QA, you need to have that automation in place. Now, you cannot achieve, the faster delivery or faster release cycle if all your, the tests that you run is manual. So that means you need to have automation in place, and that is what we call as the DevOps skills again play a very important role there. So yeah, I think Soma, you have a comment that we do have a rehearsal before placing the code in production. We are more or less doing similar bit indirectly. I agree with you, but again, is it like enough? If we say talk about the faster delivery, faster release cycle, is that enough? Can you afford to have manual way of testing the code? You cannot. If you already have an automation in place which can detect these problems, yes, probably then you already have the DevOps mindset there. Suresh, comments from Suresh that in enterprise environment, there is an infra team who manages hosts and app servers where thousands of applications owned by different dev vendors. Okay, DB team manages multiple DB servers. Application team just took after their application issues, and any issue with application related with servers or DB, we involve infra team or DB team. Now, how can we bring in DevOps in such a large setup? Okay, good question. So again, and I have worked with some of the big organizations as well, where you could be working on really large project or large application. But again, if you know, I'm not sure if you have Scrum teams. Typically, Scrum teams are like about between 6 to 8 members team, where they work on a specific kind of subtask or sub-project, not like larger. The example that I gave you about the Facebook, although Facebook is one application or one website, you may have 3 different teams, and you may have probably more than 3 as well. But the example that I gave you was you may have one login team which takes care of just ensuring that users have good login experience. You may have another team who makes sure that the photo uploads function really work fine. You may have another third team which makes sure that you have like button that you see on Facebook works great for all the end users. So you need to have you need to break that into the bigger application into the smaller kind of module, and then you can achieve one is DevOps mindset, second is you can achieve the Scrum or Agile method. Okay, lot of other comments. So release plus infra automation and continuous app management might have budgeting impact. That's right, Manish. So and that may have budgeting impact, maybe little bit more when you adopt this kind of mindset initially, but eventually it gives you a lot of benefit. If you achieve the automation, that brings down the number of people that you need to do actually same thing, and at the same time it gives you better capability. As I said, if you do things manually, there are chances that it can you may have manual errors or issues, but with automation you can achieve a lot, a lot in fact. Question from Vanita: how the organization should practice DevOps to achieve the goal? What I talked about earlier, that we need to bring Dev, QA, and operations closer, and we need to know each other's roles and responsibilities. As I said, our end goal is to basically develop a product for our end users or our customers, and at the same time we need to probably then focus on our responsibilities. So think about like Dev, QA, and operations. Developing again, say, Facebook application. Everyone has their own responsibility, but collectively they know that we are working on developing the Facebook application. And now I have this particular role to play. As I'm a developer, so I have a role for to develop the application. I am a QA and I have a role to QA the application, and I'm an ops and I have the role to make sure that application is up and running all the time to for our customers. So we continue to have our own role to play. But DevOps means that you need to have kind of enough visibility into what's going on and how do we really work together to understand each other. Okay, so a lot of questions are coming in. I want to cover a lot of important stuff. Let me pick up some of them and then we'll move forward. How can we bring DevOps in bi-model operations? That is, some teams working in typical waterfall and some teams working in agile manner. So again, you need to kind of fit into what you have, what kind of benefit that you can get from DevOps. You need to really understand what is the problem that you're trying to solve, and then only you can you'll be able to apply these. I'm not going to again pick up every question because, as I said, I have few other important stuff to handle or to share. Is it a part of project management or individual contribution? So I would say both. Individual contribution because you have your own role to play. Project management is, I would say, maybe for the first time when you have when you move from the typical IT company to more of into a DevOps company. That could be probably a program management or project management to bring everyone on the same page. That why do we need DevOps culture in our organization? Okay, so thanks everyone for all the questions. I hope I answered most of your questions. And let's move forward. Again, continuation of DevOps lifecycle. So these are the typical 3 roles that we play, right, as DevOps, or overall, in fact, when we talk about operations. So as an operations, you basically understand the application requirement, how it is being developed, deployed to production, or how it will be deployed. You also understand maybe the usage pattern and the potential users or the potential hits that you will get. Based on that, you procure servers or the hardware, which is called provisioning of those hardware. Then once you provision, then you have to individually configure those. So you may have some load balancers, you may have some web servers, you may have maybe a couple of DB masters or maybe just one DB master, and you may have multiple DB slaves behind the DB master. Now, if you see all these pieces, these are all independently kind of configured after you provision this. And the last stage is you really integrate all these pieces together to make it work really together. So like set of web servers seated behind load balancer to balance the load across web servers. Similarly, you may have multiple DB slaves behind DB master, which can again load balance between multiple slaves that you have. Moving on to the next one. Again, talking about DevOps tools. Earlier we talked about DevOps skills. Here are some of the DevOps tools. Again, not the entire list, but some of the most popular DevOps tools that we have. For infrastructure automation, there are tools like called Cobbler, Foreman, Crowbar, very popular. Again, to automate the infrastructure, like have some kind of elasticity in your infrastructure. You have the config management tools available. We have something like Puppet, Salt, or Chef. Again, similar capability, but you have these many options available now. Talking about CI/CD, again, very important to basically automate your release management process. Or so CI/CD is nothing but continuous integration and deployment. And you have again tools available like Jenkins for basically CI/CD part, SVN Git or Perforce for primarily to have the revision control or version control system, and Maven again as part of continuous integration and deployment. Monitoring, very important for for the overall DevOps function to work, which gives you the visibility into how your application is being utilized by your end users. And you can also, if you have right monitoring in place, you can also take preventive steps. So it can be really a proactive monitoring that it gives you enough trending about how your application is behaving, what kind of experience your end users are having with the application that you have in production. Moving on to the next one, which again talks about the revision control system. I think briefly we talked about that we have a Git, CVS, or Subversion available for your version control or revision control system. Software configuration management. Again, you have ClearCase, Perforce, Accurev, and there are many other tools available. For virtualization, you have Hyper-V, vCenter, and many other tools available to have virtualized environment set up in your organization. The question is, who will do QA or any specific role person? Who will do monitoring QA? So Amish, can you be a little more specific? I did not understand your question very well. So different roles that we play as DevOps. We play a role of integration engineer, like in integrating different, say pieces together, and that could be like infrastructure, what we just saw a couple of slides back, where we provision the host, we then install or we configure the host, and then we finally integrate it into one. Or it could be like, even the, as part of release engineering, you integrate different pieces of code together to make it work, like, the build process that we talk about. You may have cloud specialists. Again, today's world, very essential. I think you need to have some kind of cloud knowledge, like, AWS, like, how the infrastructure can be managed, out of the cloud. Then you need to have, automation engineers, how we can automate maybe some of the stuff that we do manually. And then finally, release engineering, very important, again, to achieve some kind of automation on how quickly, our code can be deployed to production after it is checked in, by the developer. Okay, going back to Amish's question. So it says that, let us say we are doing monitoring using Zabbix. Who will do monitoring? Is this responsibility of QA? No, it's not the responsibility of QA. So monitoring the application is primarily the role of the operations, basically setting up the, the monitoring. But it could be actually joint effort. Like, why should just ops be monitoring the application? Maybe QA should also, should be really curious to know, like, how this application is working in production. I would say even dev team should also know, like, I developed this piece of code. Let me see how this application is working in production. So they may not be monitoring the application very actively, but if it is a typical DevOps mindset that you have within the organization, dev would be very much interested to know, like, let me see how this application is working, which I developed, for our end users. Hope that, answers your question, Amish. Moving on to the next one. So this is about Puppet and how Puppet can actually achieve some of the config management that we do if we do manually. Again, a lot of automation in place, and it is really, really powerful. So as a system admin, here are the list of things that you do. You typically install servers, you configure them, you even maintain them, and while maintaining, you of course update the config periodically. Right? You may have a requirement where you have to make some changes in the config, push the changes to all the servers and things like that. Again, if you do not have, if you have not adopted or adapted any particular tool like Puppet, all of these could be really manual. Now, if you have, say, limited number of servers, you can still do it manually, maybe. But if you have, say, thousands of servers and which are maybe growing on a daily basis, it becomes really, really difficult to manage, these infrastructure manually and to make changes manually. Think about this guy where probably he is managing more than 1,000 servers. And if he has to say log into each server just to check, like, how the application is behaving or what is the health of the server, he will go mad. That's how probably he is now, because maybe he is managing the infrastructure manually. And so why Puppet? So Puppet is a config management tool that's used for deploying, configuring, and managing servers. Deploying, again, we are talking about not the application deployment, but the infrastructure deployment. Some of the features that Puppet provides, it controls all the steps right from bootstrapping to the end of server life. So right from provisioning or configuring the host to end of server life, if you want to really retard the server, Puppet can take care of that part. It can, you can define the configuration at the node level, in the sense for every node, what kind of role this particular node is going to play. You can define that config at master server level. We will talk about what is master and what is node, but actually you can define that. You can group your nodes together for different roles. For example, you can have maybe setup servers playing a role of web server. You can have setup servers playing a role of DB servers. Now you can define your Puppet in such a way that the moment you add any capacity to web server, the configuration will be done automatically. You don't have to do anything manually because they are part of that particular group. Similarly, if you have, say, a set of DB servers, set of app servers, you can group it together, and if you have to add some capacity to that particular group, the configuration of that particular server or the node that you have added new will be taken care by Puppet automatically. You don't have to do nothing. You don't have to do anything actually. It maintains consistency across nodes. So suppose you have hundreds of web servers, right? You definitely want to maintain the consistency, the configuration that you have on all the servers, which should be exactly same. Now, if you make any changes about 99th server, if you decided to make some change locally, what will happen is that the Puppet master will override that automatically, because again, it says that Puppet ensures that you have the consistent configuration across the setup that you have. Okay, moving on to the next one. So how Puppet works? As I briefly mentioned, that we have Puppet master. So if you see the pictures on your right-hand side of the slide, the bigger circle is Puppet master, where you have the configuration defined for all the nodes that you are connecting. Now, the smaller circles that you see, say host 1, host 2, and host 3, consider those as, say, a group of hosts, right? Just for our assumption or understanding. That say host 1 is nothing but maybe set of say 20 hosts for web server. Host 2 is again maybe set of another 20 or 30 servers for app servers. Host 3 could be another say 5 set of hosts for say DB servers. Now all of these will be connected to Puppet master for config management, for nothing else but for config management. Now the moment you add any new host to say host 1 chain or host 1 group, which is a web server, it will connect to a Puppet master, and then from Puppet master it will get the config meant for host 1 group. If you see here, we have the config defined for all the hosts or all the different types of hosts on the Puppet master host. Okay. Any questions that I can answer? Okay. Again, as I said, you have host level or the group level config defined on Puppet master, and then you have Puppet agents, which are nothing but all the hosts that we talked about on the right hand side, the smaller circles that you see. Those connect to the Puppet master to populate the changes or to populate the config from Puppet master to the Puppet nodes. So that's how the relationship between Puppet master and Puppet agent is defined. Now the communication between these two machines, like the Puppet master and Puppet host or the Puppet agents, are over SSL, so it is secured. You don't have to worry about that if someone is going to intercept the traffic in between and all that. So the communication is very, very secure between Puppet agents or Puppet nodes and Puppet master. Okay. Let's move on to the next one. This one talks about the steps for Puppet configuration. How the Puppet is configured. Very similar to what we talked about, that you have, the Puppet agent talks to Puppet master and it requests for the catalog. Puppet master automatically detects that, what kind of server it is. So if it is a web server, Puppet master knows that this is a web server, and of course you have to do the configuration that way. So Puppet master knows that the request has come from Puppet agent, and I need to push all the config related to Puppet, related to the web server, to the agent that is requesting for that for the configuration. Okay. Next, we'll have, I think, the demo. But any questions that I can answer on Puppet? Again, very important tool to have the config management done for your infrastructure. So I'll pause for a couple of minutes and we'll wait for your questions, and then we'll go for the Puppet demo. But feel free to send me your questions, and I'll be happy to answer that. So question from Santosh: can we deploy and I'm assuming you're asking, can we deploy the config without Puppet? You can do that, Santosh, but as I said, today's world, if your infrastructure is really large, and if you have to manage all the infrastructure manually, it becomes very difficult. Now, if your question is like, is there any alternate to Puppet? Yes, there are many other tools available, like you have Chef, you have Salt, and other tools also available. But Puppet is so far, very popular tool. But you have similar capabilities if you use other tools like Chef as well. Okay. Any other questions that I can answer? Okay. So using desired state configuration, yes, you can do that, Santosh. As I said, you can use other tools as well. But if your infrastructure footprint is really large, doing it all manually would be really difficult. If you do not use any of the tools that you have available now, it becomes really difficult. I mean, think about the situation where you have, say, hundreds of web servers. Now, if you have to make one change, suppose you have to upgrade, say, SSL certificate. If you have to do it manually on, say, hundreds of web servers, it may take probably a day or two, which is not a good idea. And if you have, say, something like Puppet, you just deploy the certificate on the central Puppet master, and all the clients will pull up the information or the certificate from Puppet master automatically. Question from Vanita: are there any limitations of Puppet? Not that I'm aware of. Again, I'm sure you're talking about config management point of view. So not that I'm aware of. There could be some limitations which I'm not aware. I mean, I've been using Puppet for years now, and I've been, I've used for various functions with different types of setups, different size of setup, and it's been really good so far. But if you have any questions specific to anything that you are thinking about, let me know. I can answer that. Okay. Any other questions? So there is a question from Ashutosh. Ashutosh, if you can answer, if you can send your questions through your question section, that will be good. I think you have been putting questions in the chat. So is Puppet free? Yes, Puppet is free, and it's an open source. Does it have load balancing capability? So Manish, if you can be again specific, like what do you mean by load balancing? Is it like for the Puppet master? If your infrastructure is large, then yes, you can have multiple Puppet masters. If you have, say, thousands of web servers or thousands of servers, which is talking to, say, central Puppet master, and if you have just one Puppet master, it may be challenging for you to manage. So it can have some load balancing. You can actually define that. But if your question is something else, let me know. I can answer that. So Shubham, your question, is this the master and agent, more of a client-server model? Yes, more of a client-server model, where Puppet master is a server, and Puppet clients are, of course, clients. So Puppet agent is nothing but Puppet client. Okay, any other questions before we can go for the demo? Okay, let's move on to the demo section. I'll unshare my screen and then log into my machine, and we'll come back. Give me about 30 seconds. Okay, question from Manish, that will it inform if any node goes down? No. So Puppet is not a monitoring tool. Puppet is a configuration management tool. So if your node goes down, Puppet will have no idea, why it went down, or it will not probably take it out of rotation. This is more for this is only for the config management, I would say, and not a monitoring tool. Okay, any other questions? Okay, that's fine. So let me share my screen. Okay. Another question, can you elaborate on Puppet client? So Puppet client, as I mentioned, you have you basically have the host which connects to the Puppet master to get the configuration. So let me give you, let me repeat the example that I gave earlier. That suppose you have, say, hundreds of web servers, and suppose you're managing, say, Flipkart.com, and you have a some festival season going on where you're assuming that you will have a lot of requests coming in and that there will be spike in traffic. What you do, you add, say, additional 50 web servers. Now what you definitely want to do is to ensure that I have the same version of, say, Apache or the web server running on all the 150 web servers, and I have the same configuration on all those 150 servers. You definitely do not want to go and manually configure additional 50 servers that you're adding to the capacity. So if you have, say, Puppet kind of setup where you just need to add 50 servers, and then those 50 servers connect to Puppet master, and then pulls up the right configuration and again install the same version of Apache that you have, that you're running for the existing 100 web servers. So that is the role of Puppet client. It's not it's a client for Puppet, but if you think about whether it is a server or client, it's definitely a server. We are talking about the web server. So it's a Puppet client, so client for the Puppet master, basically. Did that answer your question, Vanita? Great. So I hope all of you can see my screen, and this screen with black background is for, this is my Puppet master. This is in AWS. The other screen is with green background is my Puppet client. Can you see my Puppet client as well, which is with green background? Okay. I hope you can. Okay, very good. So let me go to Puppet master and let me show you what I have done. Before that, let me come to Puppet client. Now, the thing that I'm trying to do here is I will install web server with the help of Puppet master on this machine. So let me first find out whether I have web server installed or running already. So I already have it running. So let me stop it first and remove it maybe. So service httpd stop, and that will stop my web server. And then I already have httpd, which is Apache installed on this. So let me remove that httpd, right? So I have httpd 2.4.6 installed. So I'm going to uninstall it now. RPM, okay. So I use yum remove httpd. It asks for confirmation. Okay. Now the httpd is removed from this host. Let's go to my Puppet master and I can quickly verify if it is removed or not. Yes, I see only httpd tools. That means the Apache is removed from my a Puppet client machine. Now let me go to the Puppet master and let me show you what I have done. So I have already installed, by the way, Puppet master and Puppet client, and I wanted to show you how it is helpful and useful. Now there is a config file inside etc Puppet Puppet manifest. There is something called, so let me edit this file. This should be notes.pp. Okay. Now, what I'm trying to do here is, for node, this one, which is the IP address that I have entered here. So 172.31.4.15 US West 2 compute.internal. This is for AWS internal host name and the IP address that I get. So if you are aware about AWS, you typically get the public IP or the elastic IP, using which you can connect from your machine to the AWS. But every machine has the private IP assigned. So the public IP that you get is nothing but the NATed IP, but every machine has the private IP assigned. So in this case, and when they communicate to others, through other servers, they communicate typically via the private IP. So as I said, 4.15 is my client, which is here, and the machine name IP with ending with 226 is my server, which is my Puppet master. Now in this case, if you read it carefully, the second line that you see, it says package. So that means I'm going to install HTTPD on client machine. The moment client connects to this, client will pull up the information that yes, I need to install HTTPD package. So this second, third, and fourth line basically ensures that you have the HTTPD installed, HTTPD daemon installed on the client machine. Now, the one that I have highlighted here, it talks about the service. So it ensures that HTTPD process is running, right? So that is also another thing that I have defined, that client should have HTTPD process running. Now, next thing, here I'm talking about, I'm creating a user. So let me create another user. This is already created. So I create a user called say DevOps with say UID as say 4000, or let me make it 2001. And part of this particular GID, and this user will have bin bash as the shell script, default shell, and the user home directory will be say home DevOps. Okay. Now inside home DevOps, let me create a file called motd with the content today is Tuesday, right? So this is the config that I have for this particular node. So the moment this particular node connects, it will ensure all these three things. I mean, four things basically, right? The first thing is ensuring that HTTPD is installed on the machine, on this particular machine. The second thing is it ensures that the service HTTPD is running. The third thing that it ensures that the user DevOps is created or present on the host. The fourth and final thing is to ensure that this particular file, motd, is created with the content as today is Tuesday. Okay? Any questions? Anything that you did not understand and you need my help on? Let's understand this, and I'm displaying it once again so that you understand. Okay, let's go to, okay, another thing that what I have done, this is on the client, is that I have host map because I don't have these entries present in my DNS. So in etc host file, I have given my Puppet master IP address here or the host name here, and then I have aliased as Puppet master so that I can refer my Puppet master as Puppet master. Okay. Now let me start the Puppet daemon on this on master host. I hope you guys can see it. If I'm going a little fast, let me know. So this is again very important tool for the DevOps. Okay. So I've started the Puppet master daemon on my Puppet master host. Now let me go to the Puppet client now and start the agent, and let's see what happens. You may see some errors, and we will talk about it, what it is. Okay, so it is done. It says finished catalog run in 5.73 seconds. Okay. Now, if you can read this warning, you can ignore because there is some setup issue that I have. But Ashutosh. Okay, so let me highlight the error message that I got, and I want to know from you whether if one of you can tell me, or some of you can tell me why I'm getting this error. Can I increase the font size? Maybe I can. Let me find out. Okay. 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 I hope it is readable better now. So can you tell me why I am getting the error? Let me first verify what happened. So what was the first thing on Puppet? Let me terminate this. Puppet master, let me open that so that you can see it. This was the config. Let me increase the size so that you can read it easily. So this is what I have defined on the Puppet master for my Puppet client. That install package HTTPD, start service HTTPD, and ensure that it is running. Create the user called DevOps with the UID so and so, GID so and so, and then finally you create the file MOTD inside home DevOps MOTD, and then with this particular content. Right now, let's go to the client and again understand whether all these four things are done or not. So the first thing was installing HTTPD. So let's find out. So how do I find out whether the HTTPD is installed or not? Anyone? Okay, anyone? How do I find out whether the HTTPD daemon is installed or not? So Ashutosh, I have increased the font size. Let me try increasing it once again. Okay. Is it better now? Sorry about that. Okay, now the question is, how do I find out whether HTTPD daemon is installed or not? That was the first problem that we were trying to solve for. So this is a command through which you can find out. So I just ran rpm-qa. So Soma, as you know, the process verifies whether the process is running or not. In this case, we wanted to find out whether this particular package is HTTPD is installed or not, which I just ran the command, and I could see that now package this particular HTTPD 246 is installed. Now the next thing was to find out whether the Apache process is running or not, and let's find that out. So we can use ps-ef and grep HTTPD, and we see that HTTPD process is not running. Can you tell me why it is not running? So the reason why it is not running is we first tried to install HTTPD, and then while it was being installed, another set of instructions kicked in, which was to start the service. So since HTTPD was not installed by the time it was trying to start, it failed actually because the HTTPD was not installed yet, and that's the reason I still do not see HTTPD process running. Now, if I run the client again, let me go back to master and start the masters once again. And if I start the client again, who can tell me what will happen? And if you want, I can unmute you if you want to talk to the class and everyone. I can unmute you and you can answer what will happen. Anyone? Don't be shy. Okay, any guess what will happen if I run the agent again? I mean, I have 4 things configured for this agent on the master. First, to install HTTPD, which is already installed. The second thing is to start HTTPD process, or if it is not running, which in this case it is not running. The third thing was that create the user DevOps. The fourth thing was create the file. Now, if I run this command, what will happen? The HTTPD is already installed, but the HTTPD process is not running on my client machine or the agent. Who can tell me what will happen if I run the client again or agent again? So, okay, I don't see any answers. Maybe it's the lunchtime, so that's the reason. But anyway, so since the HTTPD daemon is already installed, it will not get installed again, or it will not even try to get it to install it again. But since the HTTPD process is not running, it will start it. So let's start this again. Okay. Now, okay. Now let's see what happened. Let's see if the HTTPD process is running. You can see it now, I assume, that HTTPD is running because, again, the HTTPD was installed and then it could start the service without any problem. And then let's see if the DevOps was added. So DevOps user was added. So if you edit, or you see the password file, you see the DevOps is added here with the UID as 2001, GID as 1000, and this is the home directory. Probably the home directory is not created, but you have the script defined for default shelf defined for a DevOps. So let me create this. Is it clear what I tried to do it, and did it work or not? Now let me try to run the agent once again because the MOTD file was not created. So because the directory did not exist. Now it should have been created by now. So home DevOps. If I see the file, and if I try to see the content, I can see it. Today is Tuesday. It says that. Now let me show you another thing. If I say edit this file, and if I make it as say today's Sunday maybe, and just see what happens. Like so, in this case, what I'm doing is I'm editing the file on the local client or agent machine, and ideally, what should happen if I run the client again? I have modified the file on my local machine. I did not change anything on the master. Ideally, what should happen? Anyone? Okay, I'm getting some responses, which is good. How about others? Okay, so as some of you guessed, or some of you I think probably know that it will get rolled back. So it should take the modified. No, actually it will take the file from master, because the whole purpose of having Puppet is that you should not be making any changes on the local machine. If you do it, it will get overwritten from the master. So any change that you want to push or make the changes to the files, you should do it on your master server, and because that way you can maintain the consistency. So let's run the agent again and see what happens. If you see the content, just for you to know, this is the content that I have. Today is Sunday. And if I run the agent, let's see what happens. Okay. It got overwritten with today's Tuesday. Did you see this? Why? Because it is taking the content from master. So any change that you do on the agent side, it gets overwritten. Okay. I hope it is clear. So I'll pause for a minute in case you have any questions. I'll answer that. So keep typing your questions and I'll answer that. All right. So let me go through some of the questions. So one need to run this script on each client. Is there a way to push it from master? So master do not push the config to the client. It's a pull method that you need to have this agent running on the client machine. So typically, you set up a cron job on your agent machines or client machines to pull the configuration from master. Question from Ashutosh. So we do have to run the agent on client to have the master config pulled. Yes, that's right. So it's not a master config, Ashutosh, if you understood. It's a config assigned, config defined for your client machine that you define it on your master. So it's a config defined for your client or for your agents on your master server. So it's not a master server config, if you understood. How often synchronization, question from Srinivas, how often synchronization of config is done between Puppet master and agents? So it depends, how you want. You set up a cron job accordingly and you run the agent periodically. So if you think that you do not change the web server config, every say few days, if you feel that 1 week is good enough, you set up the job accordingly. Manish, what I meant is one should not go to each client to run it. No, so Manish, I think you understood what I tried to say, that you run basically on the agent as a cron job and that it pulls. I think, I'm not too sure, but I think if you run the agent in the background, it runs every 30 minutes. But I think that is configurable. I'm not too sure though. But typically the way I have run it is as, I run the agent using the cron job, but I think there is a way you can run it as an agent and you can pass some arguments. You may want to check that. Okay. The daemon on the client fetches the config file from master and how frequently. I think we talked about that, right? I mean, you have multiple ways you can set up a cron job. I think when you run the agent, you may want to check. I think there is a way you can set the frequency as well. But ideal way I would say is run it as a cron job. Okay. Hope that I answered all your questions. Let's move on to the PPT once again. And I have few things that I wanted to share. I know we are a little over time. It won't take more than 10 minutes, I would say. But let's hold on. So let me share. Okay. Can all of you see my screen? And of course, we are done with the config. We are done with the demo. Now let's talk about the continuous integration. Briefly, we talked about that we have multiple tools available, which you can use for your continuous integration. Okay, Ashutosh, let me finish this one. I think you have a question on slide 15. So let me finish, this continuous integration one, and then probably we'll go back to slide 15. So continuous integration, or CI, is a software development practice where members of each team or members of a team integrate their work frequently. So usually each person integrates at least daily, leading to multiple integrations per day. Each integration is verified by an automated build, including tests, to detect integration errors as quickly as possible. So the example that I gave you earlier, that the Facebook example, where you make the changes and you have basically 3 teams making the changes on 3 different applications that they're working on: login, photo upload, and like button, right? Now, when you release, typically what you do, you integrate all these 3 pieces together. You ensure that after integrating, everything is working fine. One should not conflict with other, and so on. So that is called the continuous integration, and basically integration. And then the next thing is continuous integration means the moment you make any change. So suppose you make any change to say login and you want to push it to production, you want to actually integrate with the existing. Maybe there is no change to photo upload or like button, but you want to actually integrate with the existing application and see how it behaves. If something fails, then that's not a good sign. You have to actually then fix that particular problem. Now, continuous integration in CI or continuous integration allows you to publish the changes frequently to your production, make the changes frequently, and do it in more of an automated way, that you can actually do all the testing to ensure that all the changes that you have made is going to work for sure in production. So that is what continuous integration is all about. Let's move on to the next one. So continuous integration, these are the regular frequency, and these are some of the components that we have, or the system that we have within CI. So integrated means all changes up until that point are combined into the project, what we talked about. It is built, the code is compiled into an executable or package format. Tested, it is automated test. We are not talking about manual test anymore. It's all automated test, all the possible scenarios that you have been able to test, and trigger it accordingly. If it succeeds, then go to the next environment. If it fails, push back the changes that, hey, I see these problems. The changes are archived, in the sense it is version. So I'm sure I don't need to explain what a different version of the software. Looks like there was some temporary network error at my end. Can you all hear me okay now? Okay, let me go back to the previous slide. I hope you understood what is CI. Next one, we talked about the different system within CI, means integration. We talked about that all changes up until that point are combined into the project, means any change that you do, it's like really integrated before you deploy to production, is built and compiled and executable or packaged to move into the final stage. It is automated test that we have, so that again we are not talking about manual testing, because you cannot have the CI if you have all the manual testing done. So think about all the possible situations where it could fail, what are the different use cases and all that, and you design your test accordingly. So that is what automated test is all about. Archived means it is archived to a central system, version control, and finally deployed onto a system where the developers can interact with it. These are the different systems or the components of CI. Some of the tools for CI, we have SVN, Perforce, and Git for version control or repository. Git is very, very popular, and Git is designed and developed by someone called Linus Torvalds, and I'm sure most of you know who is Linus Torvalds. He is the guy who designed and developed Linux operating system, and he is the one who has now developed Git for version control. It's been a couple of years now, and it's gaining a lot of popularity because of the distributed development features and all that. Talking about continuous build system, Jenkins is again a very, very popular tool which has gained a lot of momentum and a lot of popularity. There are some of the test frameworks like JUnit, Cucumber, CPP unit, and all that, which is to have automated tests run. And there are some artifacts, repositories that you have, Nexus, Artifactory, and there are many other tools that you have. So Jenkins, talking about Jenkins again, so Jenkins provides continuous integration services for software development. It's a container-based, its container is based on Tomcat and can work with various version control systems. So Jenkins can actually really work really good with SVN, CVS, Git, etc. This was originally started as Hudson. So until a few years back, it was called as Hudson, and then Oracle bought this, and then now it is Hudson is now known as Jenkins. It includes a feature-rich web user interface, so you have the web UI through which you control all of that. That provides the ability to trigger builds, customize builds, manage resources, you have many plugins available through which you can achieve a lot of stuff, and many other features that you can manage using the web interface that Jenkins provides. Jenkins, so builds can be started by committing to in a version control system. So if you have, say, Git has version control system, the moment you make a change or commit to a change into your Git, the builds can be triggered automatically. Or you can schedule a cron job which can actually pull the data from, say, Git on a periodic basis and can trigger the build. Or the other option could be building when other builds have completed, or by requesting a specific build URL. So you can actually call a specific build URL where you have all the source code available, and then Jenkins can actually trigger the the deployment again using this method as well. These are the components of builds. In the sense, you have the build masters. We are talking about Jenkins here, so it can talk to CVS, SVN, Git, and others to pull the changes, and can push the changes to production. You can run some automated test. If everything is successful or the failure, you can send the status over IRC chat or the email, and there are multiple ways you can actually notify people about the health of the builds. Moving on to the next one. This talks about the components of the build. Again, I think the full cycle that you have Jenkins here available, and which talks to your SVN or Git server to pull up the changes, and then it can actually send the feedback based on, suppose if something fails, it goes back to developer saying that this build has this issue, and developer again fixes the problem, moves it into Git, and the cycle continues. If it is successful, then it gets deployed to production, Otherwise, you follow this particular cycle. Okay, so we are done with the webinars. I wanted to quickly walk you through, the training that we provide through Edureka. So Edureka has, these are some of the features that we have, where we have the live online class, what we, you guys experienced today, where you have the trainer or instructor available online, and this is an interactive online class that we have. You have class recordings available, something called LMS. You have 24/7 post-class support. In case you have any questions, queries, you can call, our support line or send an email to them, and they will be, happy to answer. Typically, you have module-wise quiz. We have 8 modules, which I'm going to talk about shortly, but you have module-wise quiz that you answer, and that way it is like more interactive. And finally, you have the project work that you work on at the end of the training session, and then Edureka provides you with a certificate that can be verified, again on DevOps. Here are the course content. We have 8 modules, and each module has specific thing to cover, like the first one, introduction to DevOps necessities, then common infrastructure servers that we cover in module 2. The third one, third module, we talk about implement automated installations and deployments. Module 4 covers the basic performance tuning and how we can make our infrastructure or application better. Module 5 covers basics of scripting languages, what we talked about, the very core skills for the DevOps. So we covered that part as well as part of the training program. Module 6 covers the virtualization, the VMware and all that, and its concept and how is this again useful in today's scenario. Module 7, very important one, monitoring and logging, and how you can maybe enable alerting for different situations. So it covers in module 7. The last module covers the useful DevOps tools and commands that we cover in the rest of the modules. So we kind of combine it and we start working on kind of a task or a project. So this is how we are organized. Any questions that I can answer? And while you are typing your questions, I want to quickly show you, how Edureka, the web page looks. So I talked about that you have a LMS set where you can log in and you can even go through some of the pre-recorded classes. You can download the course content. As I said, if you are stuck anywhere, you can contact support line and they answer your questions. You have the class recording also available. So if you did not understand anything, you can actually, go back to this recording and can, can understand better. Now, to answer Ashutosh's question, I think let me go back to slide number 15. Ashutosh, can you type your question? Okay. ZF. Okay. So, okay. This is nothing but it explains the flow. That from infrastructure automation, you basically, have your application available. I don't think ZF is any tool or anything here. I think SF here that you see between the upper picture and the lower one, I think that could be some kind of integration, could be Salesforce integration. So basically, this particular slide talks about that you need to have a lot of automation in place in today's world, and you need to have proactive mindset to monitor the application and take some preventive steps. This is what typically basically this particular DevOps cycle slide covers. Okay. Any questions? We are done for today, but any questions that I can answer? And I know we are a little over time and time for lunch as well, but any question that you have in your mind, let me know. If there are no questions, thank you very much. Thanks everyone for attending this webinar. It was very, very interactive. I liked it a lot. Thanks again.